There's no time like the present, and here we are. Hopefully the microphone is loud enough. I have been having issues with editing the audio lately. It's either far too quiet or far too loud. I'm no audio engineer by any extent, so it can be kind of tricky sort of managing it. And it certainly doesn't help when the fan is directly blowing and interfering with the audio. When I last recorded the previous episode of Peephole Pictures, in editing the audio, I had seen that the noise rate was higher than I thought it would be, and that was just not great. We are still in the throes of summer. We're in August right now. This is being recorded on Tuesday, August 6th, 2024 at 10:30 p.m. on a rainy night. I think it's a light rain out there, but I love rainy nights. It has a feeling of warmth, of staying inside, and with the night out, it gives us a certain feeling of solitude, and solitude is a great thing because it allows us to stay focused on what it is we would need to be focused on and not be distracted by any kind of myriad things outside. If you're writing or if you are working on any kind of artistic endeavor and you get those wonderful exterior sounds, it can really set the atmosphere and the mood to influence you on your dreams. And the same way that people often will listen to music or will listen to anything to really kind of help them get into the mindset. If you're writing a Western and you want to listen to country music, or you're, working on your, I got distracted. Somebody's texting me. Look at that. I gotta turn the. I always get to put my phone away when I do that. I try not to get distracted because that's, you want to kind of stay focused on that. And here I am talking about being focused, and now I'm getting a text message, so I'll have to return to that in a bit. But I don't know if it's said it or not. This is episode number 123. It's a Tuesday night. We're still in the throes of summer, and I love all times of the year, but summer is not definitely not the one I look forward to the most. I'm a bit over the heat. I'm a bit over having the fans running. I can definitely tell at times when things become far more not necessarily stressful. That's definitely not the right word to use, but if you got a lot to do and there's a lot that needs to be done, and the last thing I want is to feel a palpitation in my skin, and I don't want to be wiping sweat off my head. I love the summer. It's a wonderful time of the year. It's wonderful to watch summer films, get into the summer mentality, get summer reading done. But I also enjoy the solitude of perhaps a snowy day where people stay inside and getting under a blanket and drinking hot cocoa and or hot tea or anything of the sort, and winter reading and winter watching and winter writing, of course. But that's all in due time. It's important not to rush any kind of event. People will always talk about waiting for the end of the week. When people groan that it's Monday, I say bring on Monday. Bring on every day of the week. Every day is a gift. Every day is a miracle. And it's a blessing, truly, to be alive and to wake up every day with our health and our loved ones, and to face on our problems and issues head on. We want to lead a fulfilling life so that when it, becomes our time, we're able to reflect back and wonder if we had accomplished the life that we hope to have lived. Because people talk about all the time how the older you get, it feels like time's moving faster and faster. And of course, time can feel that way without saying, but it's ultimately, you got to kind of reflect and think to yourself, well, how many times were you waiting for the end of the workday, or how many times are you waiting until lunch, or how many times are you waiting for the end of the week or the end of the month, or you're going to an event next month and you're waiting for that event and you're like, I wish this would go by fast, and it's like, oh my gosh, the year's already over, and can you believe it feels like the year just started? And you really gotta kind of savor every day and be really, really aware of where you're at, and really kind of relish in the joy that is life, and how just wonderful it is, no matter how bad things get, and no matter how stressful or overwhelming or crazy that life may seem, to use that to your benefit, to make yourself a stronger person, and ultimately to push yourself to be a better person. We're in an age now of convenience, of shortening attention spans, where people will just scroll on their telephones endlessly, and will go on social media and get riled up about people who they don't even know who they are, or they'll get riled up about something someone said, or some headline that's intended to make you angry and upset. And it's don't get lost in that black hole of negativity, because it'll affect your daily life. You can turn off that phone screen, and then hours later you'll still be thinking about just some nonsense that doesn't matter, when you could be using that time to do so much better things, to be consuming art, to be reading literature, to be working on your own creative endeavors, to be watching a film, or if you're more of the social type, to engage yourself in conversation with people whom you want to be around, instead of just endlessly scrolling. It's just ridiculous, man. I think that, social media is fine in doses, but you just see people they just get addicted to it, man, and it's frightening. It's truly frightening and dystopian. But all we can do is worry about ourselves and not worry about outside forces, and to kind of be at one with our own peace, and be worried about the direction that we want to take our life in. And if that means you want to be on social media, on Facebook, on Twitter, and all that for 20 hours a day, well, man, that's your life. It's not my place to tell you how to live it. That's ultimately your call. But I ain't going to do that, man. I say nuke them all. I say get rid of all social media. Just get rid of it all, man. It's not helping anybody. It's all ridiculous. But there's also a lot of benefits too. Of course, you meet acquaintances, and you get to have wonderful conversations. When I say nuke it all, I'm obviously being extreme for extremity's sake. It's more so of just being aware of just being aware of not just the physical life around you, but of just where you are. Are you really upset over what someone said, over what a politician said, or what a comedian said, or what someone you disagree with said? Who cares? Who cares about any of that, man? It's all ridiculous. Life is too beautiful to be worried about any of that. And if you're listening to this, then I really hope that you're on a path to make your life just the way you want it to be, and just not spending hours just getting caught up in a cloud of negativity. It's just ridiculous, man. It's nonsense. A wonderful night like this with the rain outside, lightly drizzling, it's a beautiful experience to have, that you have to get in person. It's just great. I can never tell how long these, I say intros, but it's more so always the first part of the show. I'm sure people who probably listen to these episodes for the first time, they probably wonder, where are you going to talk about the films, man? You're talking about this and that, and life and all that, and hey, if this is your first time listening to the show, then this is the Cozy Corner of Cinema. We talk about many things. Not exclusively cinema. We talk about cinema, life, daily blessings, literature, any kind of artistic endeavor, man. It's just with cinema being the focus of it all, but not being the exclusive focus. So, leading right into that, we'll talk about a couple of films here worth mentioning. We'll go to 2003. Is it 2003? I say that and I don't actually check. But yeah, it's 2003. We'll talk about Dogville from Lars Von Trier. This is okay, here we go. So this is one of the last films of his that I think I've seen. I think I'm pretty much good on the rest. Maybe besides the first couple features. Those are the ones I'm not as well versed in. But let's see here, just for fun. I really wish IMDb would get rid of some of these ads that take up the entirety of the screen. Let's see here, just out of curiosity, be fun. The Element of Crime I've seen. Epidemic I've not seen. Not counting the TV movies. Europa I've seen. Breaking the Waves I've seen. The Idiots I've seen. Dance from the Dark I've seen. Dogville I've seen. The Five Obstructions I've seen. Manderley I've seen. The Boss of It All I've seen. Antichrist I've seen. Melancholia I've seen. Nymphomaniac Volume 1 and 2 I've both seen. And The House That Jack Built. So besides Epidemic, I've seen all of his features, not counting his TV films. And I've also watched the first season of The Kingdom, which was a great show. And I actually intend to buy that movie box set of all 3 seasons. If The House That Jack Built is supposedly his last film, then I think he went out with one of his most reflective and one of his strongest. I think Lars Von Trier is a brilliant filmmaker. I've enjoyed almost all of his work. Even some of his films that I may not be as interested in, I still find I have certain elements of that altruism that I find so prevalent in a lot of his work. His films are so uniquely his that, like or dislike them, it's undeniable. They all have his films after The Idiots. I would say, actually, starting with Breaking the Waves, have a certain feel, and I don't just mean with the camera quality, because Dogma 95 was obviously around this time. His film was The Idiots from 98, which is a great film, which I have a feeling will probably get a Blu-ray in the near future, with it being the uncut version on Mubi within the past year, and now they have put out The Kingdom, and the rain has picked up outside. I have a Japanese DVD of The Idiots, which has the nudity unfortunately censored, but it's the only version I could find of it at the time. This was many, many years ago, and I have not looked for it since. I've actually been interested in rewatching it out of contextual sake. When I did the 1998 episode, this was before that version was on Mubi, so I was not able to watch it. But he's a filmmaker who has a distinctive style and a distinctive tone. His films can often be very dark and upsetting, but what I think is often forgotten is how funny his films can be. Now, The Boss of It All is his only outright comedy. Ironically, one of my least favorite of his works. I don't think it's a bad film, it's just not one that I have any intention to revisit unless there's a contextual reason behind it. But even in films like Melancholia and The House That Jack Built, which have themes of nihilism and extremity, have moments of comedy throughout that feel very earned and don't feel out of place. Even in Breaking the Waves, there are light moments throughout in a fairly dark film. But I would say that with Dogville, it's one of his darker films, which is ironic following up Dancer in the Dark, which is probably his darkest, I would say, to speak. And whether or not a film is dark or not, I mean, it's completely in the eye of the beholder. But for a filmmaker like this who deals with such nihilistic sort of tones and tendencies, it's worth pointing out. I also want to mention the film he wrote and Thomas Vinterberg directed, which was Dear Wendy from 2005, which is, I believe a very underseen film, a very good film as well, starring Jamie Bell, I think, was the main character in that. Yes, that's right, Jamie Bell. It's about these characters in a small town, and they all have this club, and they all are writing... I don't remember if it was all of them, or if it was just Jamie Bell writing letters to these guns that they have. I think it's a very good film. I don't think that has a Blu-ray as well. I think that might still be on DVD. And I think Dogville is just probably on DVD as well. I have the DVD of that. But after Breaking the Waves, all of his films looked noticeably digital, in that it's not just that the Dogma 95 movement was having that digital look to it. I mean, The Idiots and Thomas Vinterberg's The Celebration, the two biggest films to come out of this movement. You only need to watch a minute of it, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Actually, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it on the show, but the documentary Side by Side, I from like 2012, I think is still a really wonderful documentary. Actually, I think one of my favorite documentaries of recent memory, and by recent I say probably the last 20 years or so, about the transition from film to digital. And a point in that film that they mention is the Dogma 95 movement, the very stripped down, very stripped back, nothing fancy, no special lighting, no makeup, no nothing for that. And obviously The Celebration broke a couple of those rules, but I think we got some very interesting results out of that. But after Breaking the Waves, we get his films that have that very digital look. Even in his more recent films, there's not a lot of shots, unless there's some specific reason for it, that have a lot of still shots. Von Trier likes to do a lot of handheld, and which I was talking about with, I think The Farmer's Daughters are on one of the recent Peephole Pictures episodes, is that as an audience member, when you see something shot handheld, there is a certain feeling of realism and perhaps even tension, depending on the context of what you're watching. You see a lot of I see a lot of like independent comedies, like smaller comedies. I always think back to like the Duplass brothers when they were doing the really bizarre camera choices to just do a lot of zooms when it wasn't necessary, and it just didn't fit the scene at all. It's almost nauseating what they were doing, but all of their films had that level of realism, not exclusively to the camera work, because a lot of those works were a lot of overlapping dialogue, a lot of possibly improvised, I really don't know, but it had that certain feeling. And these have those as well, and Dogville has that as well, because interestingly enough, when you have this film, which is it takes place in 9 chapters, which, funnily enough, is something that I'm actually not typically a fan of in films, is when they tell the audience about the certain chapters of a film, because I think instinctually, or perhaps more subconsciously, I become aware of what point of what point at the film I'm at. So if you tell me a film is in 9 chapters and I'm on chapter 9, then I'm waiting for a conclusion rather than being surprised by it. Surprised in the way where I'm not saying, "Oh, it's the end of the movie now," but I'm going, "Okay, now this is wrapping up," and I'm aware of it. Rather than you watch a film and you're so engrossed in it and you go, "Oh my gosh, wait, this is the ending. This is the ending of the film." I've been so enraptured by this film. I could have, I couldn't even tell you where I was. But for this film, it works. It's a saga over quite a period of time, dealing with themes of this was the start of his American trilogy. This was Dogville and then Manderley in 2005, and then there was never the third part. Manderley as well does not have a Blu-ray. That is only on DVD and was almost entirely recast. And Manderley in its own right. It's funny, I keep bouncing between all these other films, and the actual main center of this film I have yet to actually circle upon. So let me get a sip of this, and then we can actually talk about it. And it's funny, I said I was going to briefly talk about it, and here I am focusing almost entirely. But it's a certain kind of film, because what this and Manderley have in common is the unique way that the story, not just the story, but how the story unfolds. I mean, it's all on what looks to be a heightened stage set, as in a theater stage, with certain aspects not strictly limiting themselves to a stage. There are great times where the camera will look overhead and it looks far too massive to be a traditional stage, or we will have cars that can actually drive up into the sequence, and not so in a way where they just drive solely into frame, but more so that the camera actually follows the cars and you go, okay, this is on a soundstage of sorts, but the way that this is played out and the way this is put together is more in line with an actual theatrical production. Whereas with a soundstage, you would just make a set from there. But you'll have times in this film where characters, and intentionally so, you'll have a horrific act happening, and the way that it's framed is that there are no doors, there's no windows. It's all just whatever tape on the floor or whatever they draw on the stages to indicate where characters are at. But we'll have an act happening, and then characters will just be walking around in the foreground, blissfully unaware of what is happening. But with this film, we have Nicole Kidman's character, who ends up on the run from these gangsters. She ends up in the small town of Dogville, and with the benefit of the 3-hour runtime of this film, we follow her gradual kind of degradation into the townspeople around her, slowly turning against her for one reason or another. The film itself being something of a character being trapped in an open cage. And as the film goes on, it serves a certain mean-spirited streak without being too overbearing. I think with a cast, the cast is solid as well. Nicole Kidman and Paul Bettany and Stellan Skarsgård primarily play the main roles in this, but you also have Lauren Bacall and James Caan in the third act, Harriet Anderson from Bergman's work, Jeremy Davies, who would go on to work with Von Trier later. He has actually one of my favorite sequences in The House That Jack Built, where he has to ask Jack for a receipt for ammunition that he bought. That adds into some of the humor of the film as well. John Hurt narrates the film, Philip Baker Hall, Ben Gazzara, Stephen Fallon Hogan, John Randolph Jones. It's a very solid cast. Not all of them returned from Manderley. I think Jeremy Davies may have returned. Lauren Bacall, I think, returned. Nicole Kidman did not return. She was replaced by Bryce Dallas Howard. But this film and Manderley intentionally deal with different points in the early part of the 20th century. So this film is dealing with a very small town, almost kind of bordering on poverty in a way. I mean, the characters in this town, they don't really need a whole lot. Whereas Manderley deals with some of the race issues going on at the time, and both the films have their ending credit sequences in the same way of playing kind of upbeat pop, kind of rock music over images of acts from that period of time. And I forgot what his third film was going to be called, but it was around this time where Dogville was generally well received. From what I was reading, for the most part, I think it was generally well received, had gotten fairly good reviews, and then over time had gained more of a following, had gained more of an appreciation. Manderley, not so much. I remember there was a great bonus feature on the DVD of when Manderley played at festivals, or at a festival, I don't remember which. It was pretty negatively received, and I think Manderley is definitely perhaps his weakest film. I think not all the ideas are fully put together there. I've only ever seen that film once, so I'm purely just going off memory with no actual kind of specifics, so you'll have to forgive me for that. But Manderley, I remember, has elements that hold their own, not just with Dogville, but literally on their own. So I don't know the exact reasoning behind why he would follow that up with The Boss of It All and not do the third part. I know between the time of The Boss of It All in 2006 and Antichrist in 2009, which would kickstart his third era, perhaps maybe his most well-known era. I feel his recent work, aside from being the most contemporary in a literal sense, but has also gained the most attention from various controversies for all of his films since Antichrist, with Melancholia, Nymphomaniac Volume 1 and 2, and The House That Jack Built, for myriad reasons, all of which I think are wonderful films. And actually, perhaps maybe in the minority, I don't know, but I actually think I may prefer the theatrical versions of Nymphomaniac Volumes 1 and 2 to their director's cuts. I actually think that the theatrical cut of Nymphomaniac Volume 1 is great. The director's cut, I remember being a bit overly long, and Volume 2, even the theatrical cut, I don't think is great, but I do think it's good. I think it's just maybe not as interesting as the first part. But then the house that Jack built, I think it's just a wonderful film. Even the third act, the epilogue, I find so. When I first saw it, I didn't know what to make of it. But it's such a Hail Mary of a turn to do in a third act that I can't help but laugh at it. The very end of that film, I remember it made me laugh out loud in a positive way, and I don't mean that absolutely in a negative way at all, but truly it is a very, very Lars Von Trier ending, and it makes me, even think about it, makes me smile and makes me happy about him as a filmmaker. I'm very interested as to. I wish I had gotten on watching season 2 and 3 of The Kingdom. I think I did start season 2. I just never finished it. I've talked before about my issues with television and my own inconsistencies with following through with television shows. I consider this separate. I consider this just a miniseries, which is what it is. The same way that I don't consider Band of Brothers a television show. I mean, yes, it's HBO, but I consider that something a bit more than just something more commercial. I mean, no pun intended, but something more commercial in the sense where I'm not gonna sit down and watch like a sitcom because they don't appeal to me. I'll watch Band of Brothers and The Pacific, and recently Masters of the Air. But Dogville is a great film, and the progression of the film, the natural sort of breakdown of this character is something that is in common with some of Von Trier's other work. I guess specifically more so of some of his works like Breaking the Waves and Dance from the Dark. We have a character who is being just hammered by life, and in an almost perhaps mean-spirited way, which I think could turn some people off, but I think that the films themselves have such a consistency with what they're doing that it never becomes a turn-off where you're just watching somebody in a horrible situation and you're not engaged with it. Because you can watch, I mean, there's many films you can watch where the intention is to make you feel bad, and the intention is to just feel sick after. And that's fine. Those films work for their own right. But I find something like these to be a bit more artistically inclined. I find them to be a bit more intellectual in not just the filmmaking, but the actual whole construction of the work, including Dogville, so that when you get to the end of the film, that mean-spiritedness, when I say mean-spiritedness, I don't mean in an off-putting way, but it feels earned. It doesn't feel like, you just watch some films, and even some films that I like, so I'm definitely not knocking any films, but you just get to some films where when you get to the ending, it almost kind of makes you scratch your head as to exactly what you're supposed to get out of it. There's nothing necessarily wrong with that. I think a film should be judged on a contextual basis, but if it was a lesser filmmaker and they weren't trying to actually say anything or do anything with the material, then you could perhaps find yourself, not me, you could perhaps find yourself wondering what it is exactly you're supposed to get out of the film. Because I don't think you need to exactly get anything out of a film to have it mean something to you. I think that'd be ridiculous. People enjoy spectacle films without having to get anything out of it besides the spectacle. But those are specific for their own kind of right. But time is running out, and that will wrap it up for this episode. Thank you so much for listening. This will probably be up on the 7th, because it's 11 o'clock now. Well, it's 10:59 now, so I don't think this will be on YouTube before midnight, but we'll count this as August 6th. So have a wonderful rest of your day, your evening, whenever you listen to this. Life is so beautiful, it's so grand. Make the most of it, make the most of the work. Karma is real. You're gonna give, you're gonna receive what you give out to the world, so give out good, treat people with kindness, everything, man. Just be cool.